We knew historically about Moldova, but we had really very little sense of what Moldova was like in 1993. We realized as soon as we got here that we were joining citizen pioneers who also were curious and excited and all of those things, but also didn't have much clarity. They knew they were headed for independence, and they knew that they were headed for democracy, but weren't really clear what that road would mean. They knew that they had a history that they were going to support and cherish, and a culture that they were bringing along with them on this road. So in some ways, at some points in time, it did feel like the Wild West. And we did think that we were somewhere that we had no idea we would ever be. I think many of us came with mixed feelings. The atmosphere in Peace Corps Washington was mixed. The atmosphere in the United States was mixed at that point. Peace Corps going to the former Soviet Union? Really? This isn't the developing countries like we know developing countries. What on earth are we going to be doing there? What do we have to offer? Is it really more than politics? And I must admit that there was fear and trepidation on this side as well. We were able to meet with ministers across the government, and I'm sure you can imagine that many of those conversations were circumspect and wary. We did a lot of the, who are you dance? Who's Peace Corps? Volunteers? They really want to come live here for 2 years? What are they going to do? Are they trained? What's their credentials? They must be making a lot of money. They're going to come live here for 2 years. And there was also the sometimes hint of, are you sure you're not spies? Are you sure you're not coming to judge us and take back this information? Please remember, very few Westerners had been to Moldova. My acquaintances said, where? You're going where? To do what? There were a few flights a week. You had to get to Frankfurt on time to get the plane. And it was Aeroflot, which then turned to Moldovan, Air Moldova. And oh my goodness, that's another whole host of stories for another time. Those of you that have had the opportunity to fly Aeroflot will know exactly what I mean. Of course you know, but I just need to remind you, staff and volunteers didn't have cell phones. I have missed mine actually this trip, which is amazing. We didn't have cell phones, we didn't have laptops. A call to the States was operator generated, and you had to order the call. Risky at best, often disengaged after hello. Mail came through the embassy, where we had such fine support, thanks to the ambassador and her great team. Banking, money, no accounts really at first. So a lot to sort out, and a lot that said, we're really isolated, we're really far away, and we're really alone. And then, we experienced what you all in this room have experienced. We met people who were so delighted we were here. We met people who were anxious to see us, who wanted to know who we were, who wanted to share their questions and their answers. Shortly after we arrived, I went with the ambassador to a small village for a church opening. And after the ceremony, an older gentleman in his World War II uniform took my hands and with teary eyes said, I'm so glad you've come. I'm so glad you've come. You promised at the end of the war that you would come. And you did before I died. Quite a humbling experience, since I had not been the one that had made the promise. And here we were. That's but a vignette of the welcome we received everywhere. As has been said, President Sneaker wanted us. And without he and Ambassador Pendleton, we wouldn't have been here. And we were very proud about that, and also feeling very responsible. He provided, through the Ministry of Education, two, at that point, employees of the Ministry of Education to help us set ourselves up in the education program. They were our mentors, became our colleagues, our friends, and our associates. They were Nina Potaraka and Dumitru Tabak. You all know. And love Nina as much as I do. Dumitru, unfortunately, is no longer with us. Peace Corps is eternally grateful to the government of Moldova for signing the two of them to work with us. Again, welcome every district we visited, from the district inspector general to the principal, to the teachers, to the students. You've all experienced this. The families that provided homes for the volunteers. We were always so well received. The warm welcomes, the food. I mean, in Chisinau in those days, in the winter particularly, it was a little tough to find stuff. Looking at people who remember. We couldn't find fresh fruit, and being an American, I didn't know where to shop, really, to get the meat. I know other people found it, but it was a little tough to find. We would go into these villages, into the district inspector's meeting, and here would be this table full of food. I would think, oh my God, where did it come from? I was always amazed. The next thought, of course, was always, and who's going to eat it all? But we always managed. I know you've also experienced the longing, the yearning to reach out, to expand, to welcome, to learn, to give, and to receive. So there were the words. There was us learning the culture. There was us learning the language. What were we going to do? As Ambassador Pendleton said, the first group that came, the assessment team, said that English education would be the project that we would begin. Rest assured, this was not chosen because Moldova did not have an excellent English teaching program. As Ambassador Pendleton has said, the embassy, all of us were scooping up English teachers like mad who had been trained here. Liliana came and joined us and helped us train other volunteers. Lilia, Angela. There was not a need for how to teach English. What was missing was the conversational, current fluency. When we would go visit schools, the materials were basically 1940s and 1950s. The topics were out of the 1940s and the 1950s. Not the kinds of language that was going to help Moldovans build that bridge that both President and the Ambassador have talked about, to really be fluently conversant in this 1990s globalized world. That's what we came to build that, to fill that niche and to begin to build that bridge. We never saw ourselves, I need to be real clear about this, we never saw ourselves as only offering English education. Because of the way in which we mentored and taught, and because of the topics that we covered as we worked in the classroom, we were also teaching critical teaching skills and analysis. We brought an educational methodology which was learning-centered, that encouraged questions and problem solving, and opened up discussions to personal conundrums as well as economic, environmental, and historical topics. You don't think teachers were concerned about that? Those Moldovan teachers, when we said, oh, it's learner-centered. I'm moving away from the script just for a minute because I remembered this morning. And I think it's important to remember how we came with our methodology, knowing that that's how we had all learned and how we were comfortable teaching. And we met teachers who were quite comfortable with theirs. And that's how they had learned and how they were comfortable teaching. And it was their system, which was quite different from ours. It was easy to become judgmental. Well, it'll never work. And then you would look at the English that people were speaking and say, well, might have worked. So what we did and what we all learned, English is just an example, but what we all learned that there wasn't any black and white. There was a ton of gray. And as we brought ourselves together and talked together and ate together, yeah, and drank the cognac and the wine together, we could figure out what each of us were bringing and keep our focus on what it was that we were here to do. And it was wonderful. Another important aspect which I need to mention is that our program would focus on all ethnicities. Peace Corps volunteers would be assigned to Russian-speaking schools, where English had been traditionally offered, and they would also be assigned to Romanian-speaking schools, where French had been the choice foreign language in the Romanian-speaking schools. So we wanted to make sure that English was available and that we were available across the world, across the country. From our point of view, this project did meet or address the priorities, as I said before, of the Moldovan government. Those priorities to become conversant with the West. The West was reaching out, Moldova was reaching out, everybody was reaching out, and we were thinking that we were playing an important role in helping form that conversation. I always saw the initial programming as strong and but a beginning. Those first years were exciting, a challenging, and a rigorous time for Moldova. Life was hard. I must be honest, life was hard during those years sometimes. The transition from Soviet rule to independence and democracy was filled with questions, shortages, and the need to create new programs, new systems, new structures everywhere. This posed a lot of difficulty for those of us that were accustomed to structure, to being able to predict and count on something that would happen every day. I well remember the fuel shortage, and I think those in the room who were there remember the fuel shortage as well. It was cold. It was bitterly cold. I'll never forget walking down the streets of Chisinau, and there was heat coming out of one of these apartments, and I thought, what on earth happened? There's no heat in my room. Well, the central heating had come on, and it was coming on due to the hierarchy of who got the heat next. I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then we went to visit a school. And in the school, again, there was no fuel, so heat was those days, sometimes you had heat and sometimes you didn't. The inside of the windows were icy. The kids were in their winter coats, their hats, their gloves, and were the teachers, and so were we. Everybody was still focused on learning. I was amazed. The kids were delighted to be there. They got me to sing bingo. I hadn't sung bingo for I don't know how long. I was amazed at the kids, and I was also absolutely awestruck at the volunteers and the teachers. Every day, they got up with new ideas, new suggestions, and new ways of working. We all shared the experience. We all experienced what we experienced, and as has been said, we all tried together to make it work. I know every Peace Corps volunteer in the world, at some point, obsesses about food. It doesn't matter where you are. You just get obsessive about food. Well, it happened here too, and we felt so justified. Of course, you always feel justified when you obsess about your food. But we were having trouble in the winter finding fresh things. And I remember visiting a volunteer in one of the villages who just was not feeling good at all. No part of him felt good. And I said, what's up? And he said, nothing that a good, crisp salad topped off with a baby Ruth wouldn't solve. I said, oh, honey, I don't think we've got that. I think volunteers also struggled with the uncertainty of whether